Well, hello there, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Money and Change. My name is Ira Robinson. As always, we're here with Stu Shear. Hello, Stu.
Hey, Ira, how are you doing today?
Not too shabby at all. I got a chance to play a little bit of games and do a little bit of live streaming with it over there on our YouTube channel, and it was a lot of fun. I went dark side with the Sith, so very cool time.
Wow. And all I did was go out to Home Depot to get some granules to get the critter out from under the shed. You have all the luck.
Indeed.
And I had all the wind. And you try to put down these smelly crystals to get these critters out from underneath your shed, which is in fairly pristine condition. And you get that stuff on you, and it just makes your day a very bad day.
Oh, yeah, that would.
I didn't want to use the spray on the animals or myself because it was a little windy, but the crystals went down and I was trying to dodge those. So hopefully I get rid of an unwanted, unpaying tenant, if you know what I mean. But anyhow, we've got a lot to cover today. We've got a lot of interesting stuff to go on. And, before we get going, we always have shout outs. And so with the shout outs, we have, of course, WCET FM 101.7, Columbia, South Carolina. That's Columbia Talk, if I remember right.
Indeed,
yes. And WCET FM 101.7, I'll tell you what, they've been carrying the show, and we really appreciate it. And a big hats off to the people out in Columbia, South Carolina, and their affiliations. Also, a big shout out to the University of Findlay. That's www.findlay.edu. A big shout out to Shana Knack, the Assistant Director of Development, and also Captain Steve Baum of the Police Department there, and also the President, Catherine Fell. She's done a fantastic job, and the university has been growing and growing, and the College of Business, I'll tell you what, it is a beautiful building. It is a big building for a small campus. It is just out of sight, and they have very good programs there, whether or not it's in business or you're in education or, general studies, even in pharmacy, equestrian studies, pre-vet, veterinary. They have a lot. They have a lot more than when I went there. And they've also got a very good basketball team. Matter of fact, Steve, if you're listening, I'm going to be coming up next Saturday. So you better have a spot ready. Anyhow, a big shout out to the guys at University of Findlay. Their basketball team is 15th in the country, and they're very good. And a big shout out to their coach, too. So, we've got some good sports up there for a small Division II AA school. Anyhow, Rusty Duck's Custom Pens. Wow. I was with Rusty Duck yesterday building a brand new website for him, which features a lot of his pens. And we're about halfway done with that. And some of the work that he does is fantastic. He even showed me pictures of handles of a pizza cutter, one of those pizza wheels, that he made a handle for. It was beautiful. I mean, this is top-notch stuff. He's very good at what he does, but that's Rusty Duck's Custom Pens. Check him out on Facebook. Also, D52 Creative Services with Mary Frances Barnes Rodriguez. I got it right. And she does a lot of good work in developing things, graphic design, illustration, ads, brochures, flyers, marketing plans, logo development, market research. She does it all. She's fantastic. And if you go to the friendsofmoneyandchange.weebly.com, you're going to see Friends of Money and Change. And of course, Rusty Duck is there. Also, we have D52 Creative Services and my good buddies, Scott and Susie Phillips from the American Wood Shop. And they're have just finished doing season 25. That's 25 years of videos through WBGSU at Bowling Green State University. And I've had a chance to tour the American Wood Shop, and I've known Scott for many, many years. I've known his family, and it's just phenomenal the things that he can do and the knowledge that he has. So when he gets back from Utah, probably in April, after playing around in the snow, I'll probably see him again. So we've got that, and we also do Show Us, Don't Tell Us with Skills and Mike and Papa Bear, and we've also got somebody at L&M Radio Network. Do you know Michael Vera?
Indeed, he's kind of a nice guy, but he's what we call the boss man over there.
Oh yeah, he's the boss man. And one of these days we'll do another show with him. We were on a roundtable a few weeks ago and had a blast.
Oh yeah.
That was fun. I always enjoyed that. And also, there's somebody at Open Eyes Network, and I can't figure out who the heck that person is. He writes a lot. I mean, he has bloody fingertips at the end of each day.
Yeah, that would be me. That would definitely be me. Yeah, you guys can find all of my work over there at originalworlds.com. That's where all my books are. And I've written about, let me see, 1,500 words so far today, and that was with doing some live stream gaming as well. And now we're recording. It's been a day, that's for sure.
I can imagine. Hey, Papa Bear has a new radio show that's on
Yeah.
WCET.
Yeah, he's over here at L&M Radio Network as well. That's on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays from 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time until noon. It's called What's Out There, and he's doing a really good job with it. I'm enjoying the show.
Yeah, I've listened to it, and it's also on YouTube, just like our show.
Tis
So how do
indeed,
we
yep.
get to YouTube?
Well, my channel is at youtube.com/C/Open Eyes Network, and you guys can hit the subscribe button while you're there and get notified of when we put out a new show or go live or whatever the case may be. Lots of good stuff available there.
That's right. So we're almost everywhere. We're on Open Eyes Network. We're on L&M Radio Network. We're on WCET. We're also on YouTube.
We're
Wow.
also on iTunes, TuneIn. Let's see. Yeah, lots of different places. Stitcher. Yeah, we're all over the place.
Holy cow. I mean, are we getting a resume or what? That's quite a lot of stuff. Well, before we get going here, we always do a disclaimer, and the information contained in this presented material is from the posting of news agencies on the internet and are not necessarily the views or opinions of the owners of this program. We are not responsible for and expressly disclaim all liability for damages of any kind arising out of use, reference to, or reliance on any information contained in this broadcast. The information provided is not offered as financial advice, financial planning, or for investment purposes, so you want to use this information at your own risk. And from the currency chart today at xe.com, it'll be a sad day. I'm not going to report the Vietnamese dong next week. I'm going to drop that. For some reason, I don't want to really get out there and kind of have fun with the dong. You know what I mean? And so it's the Vietnamese currency, and if you're invested in it, you'll have to check xe.com. But what we have this week, and it'll be the last reporting for the Vietnamese dong, the euro is at $1.24 to the U.S. dollar. It jumped up 2 cents. Also, the Great British Pound went up to $1.40. That's a 2-cent jump there. The Australian dollar went to 79 cents. That's a penny jump. The Canadian dollar stayed the same at 79 cents. So no movement there. The Swiss franc went up a penny to $1.07. The Japanese yen is still at 9/10 of a cent. The Chinese yuan is at 15.7 cents to the dollar. It dropped 1/10 of a cent. The Kuwaiti dinar still is at $3.33. The Vietnamese dong, well, it's at 22,698.93 dong to the dollar. And that's it for the last reporting on the dong, a musical tone. Bitcoin, hey, Bitcoin jumped. Last week it was $8,234.51. Now it's up to $10,774.72. That's a lot of volatility. You go back 4 weeks, it was like $12,093.98 for one Bitcoin. And then we had some theft of 150 million Bitcoin. And before that, we had a theft of around, 503 Bitcoin or 523. Anyway, it was a big theft. And the 523 is in million. And nobody could be found that did it. And that's crazy. It's too volatile to have. If somebody offered you Bitcoin, would you take it?
If they offered it to me for free, yeah, I definitely would. But if I had to make the decision to purchase one, no, I definitely wouldn't.
Well, if you got it for free and could you sell it the next day?
uh, I suppose technically yes, you could, but I think if I remember right, it takes a little bit of time for the transfer ships to occur. Something like a few days for
Like
transactions.
3 to 4 days.
Yeah.
So you can't really go into McDonald's and say, okay, I want to take so much off of my Bitcoin.
Yeah, I mean, right now with the value of Bitcoin, you're not going to walk into McDonald's with it, that's for sure. But I know a lot of people. In fact, I just talked to somebody yesterday. I was doing an interview with them on their show, and they were discussing how they are professional poker player online, and now a lot of the poker websites and that kind of thing are using Bitcoin to cash out the big winners and that kind of thing. So, yeah, it's definitely becoming a thing.
Well, according to Gerald Celente, it's going to be around to stay. But just remember this: if you have it, and you have it in your, in quotes, wallet, which is a digital wallet that you have to have, and your computer goes down and you haven't saved any of your data to prove that you have that, it's gone. Somebody can go in and steal that Bitcoin. Can you get it back? Maybe, maybe not. It's just a digital number that's out there. Can you hold it in your hand? No. All you can see is numbers on a screen. That's about it. You can't really carry it in your own personal wallet. You can't really spend it quickly. But if you invest in precious metals, that's a different story. Those can be transferable. And what's happening now is that people are actually buying more precious metals. And if you take a look at gold, last week it was $1,316.52 for 1 ounce. It's now up to $1,347.26 for an ounce. So it's going back up. Silver, last week it was $16.35 an ounce, and now it's $16.66 an ounce. And if we take a look at APMEX, right now, silver is credit card is $20.53. Bitcoin is $19.92. And if it's a check or a wire, it's $19.71. And it can be as low as $1.99 over spot. And the spot would be $18.71. That's current right now. So it's going back up. So, and that's only been since 4 o'clock today. And now it's, we were at $16.66. Now it's up to $18.71. And that's for a 1 ounce coin. And I'm not just pushing APMEX. There's Silver.com. There's Kitco. There are a lot of others out there. Just make sure that they're reputable. Make sure that you have a good place to store them. And make sure that when they deliver them, they just don't put a box on your front door and leave. There've been a lot of thefts of people following different types of trucks, whether it's UPS or whether or not it could be um, FedEx or FedUp. No, FedUp. That's what happens when you combine FedEx and UPS, isn't it?
Yep.
Okay. Uh, I just created a new corporation, FedUp, or UPS, and what they do is they just sit there, and the truck comes along and puts a box in front of a doorway and leaves, and you don't sign for it. And so they wait just a little bit, and if nobody picks up the box, they drive up and they take the box. You don't want to do that with gold and silver. You want to make sure that you have to sign for your purchase or your delivery. And normally that's what you get with APMEX. They will not leave the box on the front doorstep. You have to sign for that. So, you want to check into that. Um, you take a look at platinum. Wow, platinum last week was $991.50. It's now up to $1,007.40. But the big jump was palladium. It went from $997.83 an ounce up to $1,044.75 an ounce. And that's a pretty sizable jump. Ethereum, hey, it went to $934.16 from $828.96. So, how high are the cryptocurrencies going to go? Who knows? We don't know. I mean, people could gamble their money away and take out loans for Bitcoin, use their credit cards for Bitcoin. I think that's stupid. I don't know about you, but I think that's stupid to do that
Yeah, it is.
because you're paying interest on the purchase that you made, and you could lose that amount, overnight. And so, it's not really a good investment right now. Well, we often talk about the different banks and what's going on with the dollar. And Deutsche Bank came out in an article and they said nobody can understand what's going on with the dollar. The answer is simple. And that came out from Tyler Durden at Zero Hedge. And he said earlier this week the bizarre, unexplainable, ongoing plunge in the dollar and the U.S. bond prices in the aftermath of the stronger than expected CPI, which is Consumer Price Index print, which also sent equities surging, prompted at least one trader at Citi, CITI, to explode. Wake up, folks, it's not risk positive. Then again, maybe it's not all that unexplainable. And as Deutsche Bank's foreign exchange strategist, George Saravelos, Saravelos, writes, he has been getting numerous inquiries as to how it can be that U.S. yields are rising sharply, yet the dollar is so weak at the same time. And he believes the answer is simple. The dollar is not going down despite higher yields, but because of them. Higher yields mean lower bond prices, and U.S. bonds are lower because investors don't want to buy them. And as he puts it, this is an entirely different regime to previous years. And maybe the bottom for the dollar is now in, according to him. And, from Deutsche Bank, it said, blame the dollar on yields. We're well into 2018, and the feedback from recently attending the Trade Tech FX conference, the foreign exchange conference in Miami, Florida. That's a warm place. I wish I was there. Is that the market is still struggling to understand or really embrace the dollar weakness. And how can it be that U.S. yields are rising sharply, yet the dollar is so weak at the same time? The answer is simple. The dollar's not going down despite the higher yields, but because of them. Dollar weakness ultimately goes back to two major problems in the greenback this year. First, U.S. asset valuations are extremely stretched. The U.S. bond market and equity prices cannot continue going up at the same time. And this correlation breakdown is Well, it's structurally bearish for the dollar because it inhibits or slows down the sustained inflows into U.S. bond and equity markets. And the second dollar problem is that the U.S. twin deficit, the sum of the current account and the fiscal balance, is set to deteriorate dramatically in coming years. And the current account that also needs to be financed will widen with multiplier effects, according to the report. The dollar still has more to run. But if the Chinese come out with their gold-backed yuan and it gets wide acceptance, we continue to have bubbles with student loan debt at $1 trillion or higher. We have the problems with car debts, subprime loans on cars. We have a subprime problem with housing. We have bubbles, and when they start to burst, things could get bad, and the dollar could go down. You know, if you had $1,000 in the bank, Ira, and the next morning you woke up and you saw that the US dollar had been devalued by 30%, what would you do? What would you think?
Well, I would definitely be devastated. I mean, especially if that was all that I had on hand, no other backup or anything like that. It would be very, very disturbing to say the least.
Yeah, it would be disturbing. Well, it happened in Greece, didn't it, several years
You
ago?
did, yeah. And people were flaming. I mean, literally
Oh,
throwing fireballs and everything everywhere.
oh yeah. Well, riots in the streets and everything else. Now, I don't know if we would have riots here, but it's like I've talked about on the show before. What happens if you go to the ATM? And by the way, tomorrow is President's Day, and the banks aren't going to be open. So here you go. You have to do some shopping at Wally World or wherever, and you have to pay some bills. And you go to the ATM and you put your card in, and the ATM does not work. Or it says no money, offline. And you need to get stuff done that day. How can you do that? That gets scary. You can say, well, I could write a check. Well, what happens if you don't have checks or you've run out of checks? Gets scary, doesn't it? So you want to make sure that, before you get into precious metals, before you get into even Bitcoin, which is a bad investment, in my opinion, you want to pay down your debt. You want to put some money aside. You want to get some long-term foods that last 25 years or more, or just canned goods that will last up to 5 years. You want to be able to get a way to store and purify water. You want to make sure you have your medications that you need. If somebody's a diabetic, they need to have their medications. If some people have heart problems, COPD or whatever, or CHF, congestive heart failure, you have to have your medications. And you need some spares. I don't know if the doctors will give you spares, but you want to have your medications. You want to have vitamins. You want to have clothes for the season. If it's cold where you live, make sure you have warm clothes. Before you get into investing anything, you want to, set some money aside. Keep it at home to pay your bills. Some people have said, and the big name economists, hey, take your money out of the bank and leave only enough in the bank to pay your bills. Everything else is yours. That might work for a while, but what happens if the money's no longer any good? And the government comes out and says, well, we're going to have a new currency. We're going to call it the megabuck or the money and change buck or pass the buck. That would be a good one. But you have that, and you have to go out and spend your old dollars, and then they say, well, we're only going to give you 30% of what that's worth. So you give them a dollar bill. Well, they take 30 cents off the top. They're going to give you 70 cents for that. That's kind of hard to swallow. If you have gold and silver, platinum, palladium, even copper, if you had those, you could trade for that if you have them in the small amounts. If you have gold, a tenth of an ounce would be good. You could barter with that. You couldn't barter with a big bar of gold in your pocket. First of all, it would tear your pocket and it would be very heavy to lug around. Same thing with silver ingots. It's still difficult to haul those around, and they are heavy. Silver dollars are heavy. Quarters back beyond 1965, I believe, have a lot of silver. They had about 90% silver in them. The current coins are basically worthless. It's cupro-nickel, and it kind of looks like silver, but it's not. Copper pennies, yeah, they have some copper in them. But the money's been dumbed down along with the population sometimes. You think of some of the idiots you see doing crazy things. And you take a look at what happened down in Florida, and I know Ira and I were talking about that before the show. Yeah, I have a lot of sympathy for the people who were injured and killed. I have a lot of sympathy for the people down there. But there's a lot more to it than just what happened. And it's all starting to come out. And it's really deplorable that certain federal agencies that are tasked with handling serious crimes knew something was going to happen with this guy for
5 months.
5 months and didn't do anything.
Yeah, the FBI was aware of him. There had been tips that had been coming into different organizations up to and including the police coming and interviewing him before the shootings ended up happening. He spoke multiple times about having plans to go and shoot up a school. So there were things that were already going on, and it was not just the the blame basically cannot be just put on whoever it is that sold him the gun. There were other things that were going on before that moment even occurred that could have stopped this whole situation before it happened.
Well, and plus there were reports from other people that there was another shooter.
There were quite a few second shooter witnesses from that day that came out, and of course the media is not talking about that in any kind of way. Even if you go again with the official story, though, there were so many holes that were going on with all of it that it's questionable at best what really happened with that whole situation. It definitely, one way or the other, is a horrible situation, and just because we call things into question does not mean that people, were not hurt, that they did not die. Those things absolutely have happened, but can we have, total blind faith in the official story behind it all? I don't think so. I really don't.
Well, when people first saw it on TV and they listened to it on the media and it was on YouTube and everything else, I looked at the guy's face and I thought the shooter, of the alleged shooter, I'll put it that way, his face didn't look right. It looked like he had been drugged. And even when he came in for pre-sentence, or not pre-sentencing, pre-trial, he didn't look right. And that refers me back to the guy in Colorado that went into the theater and shot people.
Yeah, James Holmes. He was definitely on something when he got pulled into court. He was very out of it. I'm surprised whenever it comes to these kind of situations when the shooters actually survive to go to trial, because it's a pretty rare occurrence that that ends up happening. One of the other things that I've wanted to speak about with this whole situation is the amounts of people that have come out trying to, screaming gun control and so on and so forth. And my statement to those types of people that are, just standing on the soapboxes, hollering that kind of thing out, is that if you look back in time, the amount of guns that are owned here in America have not really changed over the past 30 to 40 years. I mean, it's essentially along the same amount per, like when you go with the per capita kind of thing, it the amount of guns rises with the population. It doesn't really change percentage wise. The point though that I'm trying to make is that when all is said and done, we didn't see this kind of thing really happening 30 to 40 years ago. And now it's becoming so commonplace that it seems like every 2 or 3 weeks we're hearing reports of this kind of thing occurring in schools. So the question isn't do we need more gun control or anything along those lines? It's what has happened between now and then to make it so that this kind of thing is becoming more prevalent. I think if people look in that direction, we can actually start getting to a resolution to this problem.
And I can't go into any school here where I live
Well, that was
without
one of
having to go through
yeah, that
security.
was one of the things that I was questioning right from the start, is that this guy was 19 years old and he's not a student there anymore. How did he even get in the front door? I couldn't even go into the front door of my child's school as the parent without being questioned about why I'm there, and so on and so forth. So again, so many things happened with the whole situation that are just questionable at best.
Well, and somebody brought it out today that they thought it was a false flag operation. Yeah, people were injured and killed, but maybe it was to get a political point across. And, you have to wait a couple of days after an event like this to see how everything plays out, because how the media portrays things maybe is the way that they want to sway it. And it's not really what happened. Something else happened beyond that. And so you need to take a look at everything surrounding what has happened, and you want to be aware of your surroundings. And, it's the school system's fault for they knew the guy, they expelled him. Did they have any locks on the building doors when you go in? Did they have cameras to record when he went in? A lot of questions are there. And, if you take a look and do some research on false flags, that kind of goes back to even the Spanish-American War. And you take a look at those. To get people riled up, you have to do something. So then something is created, and yeah, some people are going to die from it, which is tragic. But it develops the anger enough that everybody says, yeah, let's have a war with Cuba, or let's do this, let's do
Yeah,
that.
yeah, and when you toss in logic and facts to the whole thing, again, things start to fall apart. You gotta think about this in a different kind of way, or a different kind of light. The amount of guns that are in the country is about 3 times as many people living here. There are about 900 million guns, and there are about 300 million people that are living here. If there was a problem with people who legally own guns, we would see much more problems happening. And yet, in the areas where there is the strictest amount of gun control, there is also the highest amount of gun related murders and crimes taking place. There are essentially 30,000 homicides per year relating to guns. And out of those things, like, okay, we're if you look at worldwide statistics, we're number 14 on the list. No, I'm sorry, we're number 4 on the list of the highest number of murders per capita in the world. Okay, in relation to guns. But then if you remove 4 cities from the list of America, which would be Washington, D.C., Chicago, Baltimore, and I believe Seattle, if I remember right. Anyways, if you remove these 4, which have the strictest gun control laws in the country, by the way, then we actually drop to number 4 from the bottom of the list. Okay. So it's a major difference between those two things when you take away the 4 cities that have the strictest enforcement with gun control, and yet they have the most murders per capita of anywhere in the country by guns. So the problem is not an issue of needing to pass more laws, needing to pass more legislation, so on and so forth. And the gun control is not the problem. The guns are under control. We're seeing calls for bans of assault weapons and so on and so forth, and yet people don't realize that assault weapons have already been banned by ownership of the citizens of the United States since the 1960s.
Well, and you take a look at Chicago. Now, I've got a gal I went to school with, Terry Hemmert, and she's a DJ at WXRT. She's one of the top known DJs in Chicago. And Chicago's a fantastic town. Just don't go where you're going to get shot. And by the way, if you want to be an undertaker, that's a good place to open up a business because people are dying all the time there. And I can't tell you how many died in one weekend. What was it, 30 in one weekend?
Yeah, on average, they have anywhere between 15 and 30 homicides every weekend in Chicago. Every weekend.
Yeah. So, I mean, oh well. And well, that does have something to do with money and change.
It does.
We,
Absolutely.
do you want to live in a city that has a lot of crime? Do you have to pay a lot for protection? And if you're going to be an undertaker or a funeral director, maybe that's a good place to open a business. But our hearts go out to the people that were injured and killed in Florida. And it brings to light the fact that certain agencies, that includes the schools, that includes the FBI, probably even the local police, and the politicians in the area, for not securing the schools and not taking care of the situation. And they can spend all the time, they could probably say, oh, it was the Russians that did it. No, it was a lone shooter or a shooter with an accomplice in there, or maybe 2 shooters and a patsy. And you don't know. Not until all the facts come out. And when they do come out, everybody's going to be pointing fingers at everybody else, but they have to solve the problem. And if I had kids and they were in a school system and there was a lot of violence, they would not be in that school system. I would be looking to change jobs and move in a heartbeat. That's just the way I feel. So again, our sympathies go out to the families and the victims that were killed and injured down in Florida. Well, getting back to money, according to the Bureau of Labor Services and the Consumer Price Index, there was an article out in Zero Hedge that said, with the CPI looming, here's a heat map of U.S. inflation. Gee, do we have inflation? Go to the grocery store, take a look at the outside aisle. Look at the prices. There's seasonal prices on produce, on dairy, and so forth. If you just shop the outside aisles of a grocery store, you'd probably save more money than shopping the interior aisles because that's where they get you. But with this article in Zero Hedge, it says, with what is arguably the year's most important number set to hit, the Bureau of Labor Services reveals the CPI, or the Consumer Price Index number, expected at about 1.7%, just below December's 1.8%. And traders are betting or hedging whether the U.S. economy is running hotter or colder amid concerns. What a beat would send risk assets even lower. And while we don't know what the BLS or Bureau of Labor Standards will reveal, to explore what is taking place at a far more, we'll call it granular level than the broad averages disclosed by the government, Goldman, and we've heard of Goldman and Goldman Sachs and so forth, but Goldman has analyzed the transcripts of America's largest companies to identify where the bottom-up concern over rising costs is more acute. And more specifically, Goldman searches for communities and commentaries and everything across industries and around inflationary pressures with a specific focus on identifying trends around freight, logistics, wages, and commodity costs. Gee, what's logistics? Oh, it's going from Chicago to Cincinnati or Cincinnati to Timbuktu.
Hopefully going from Chicago to Cincinnati safely.
Oh, yeah, without getting shot and so forth. They have to pass through Fort Wayne, don't they?
They do, yep. We are known as
Sometimes.
the crossroads of the Midwest for a reason.
Well, you have a lot of trains that go through Fort Wayne.
So
And you've
many
got the
trains.
interstate too.
So many trains.
So many trains. Yeah, I know. Well, you take a look at stuff that's going on. You take a look at wages, for example, and this is from Goldman's findings. Banks, hotels, construction, restaurants, and leisure places, among others, are called out. And you have labor inflation as one of the most prevalent commentary around minimum wages and one-time bonuses on the lack of tax reform on the back, not lack. We just had a big change in tax reform. And you're taking a look at, that type of a charge reflects higher than expected labor costs resulting from strong demand for home remediation services. And you had like hurricanes like Harvey and Irma and some of the stuff that came through from Weyerhaeuser Company, and that they produced a lot of lumber. And you have a tight labor market. And so, you have pressures there. And you have flexing staff and labor costs. And you're moving the minimum wage to $15 in some cases. You know, you have to take a look at what is actually happening. Yeah, we got a good setup with the tax advantages and so forth, but other things are going to start popping out. You take a look at commodity costs, and like feedstock, and you take a look at that, and material transcripts, and consumer areas like household durables, food, staples, retailing. They haven't been immune. The prices have gone up. You take a look at laptop computers. They were down. Now they're starting to go back up. Sometimes you get a good deal, sometimes you don't. Electronics, hey, they're made overseas. The dollar gets less in value, and we're going to pay more for that. You take a look at the price of LED components for those LED lights. You think that they're going to continue to decline, but then the costs are going to start going up. Take a look at steel prices. The Chinese are trying to dump their steel in the United States. And President Trump is trying to set up a tariff to keep them from doing that so we can stimulate the U.S. steel market. So we don't know. And then you take a look at trucking and transportation logistics. Most retailers, really have yet to report what's going on with higher freight and logistics costs. And you've got a lot of heavy duty truck utilization that is really at a record level, according to the report. And the market's tight. And you have increased cost given fuel and availability, and that came from the Colgate Palmolive company. You've got other things with the Clorox company, fourth quarter report. So are we going to have a scary CPI report that comes out. We'll have to wait and see. But costs are going up. Gasoline costs. I don't know about you, but our gasoline costs went up here.
Yeah, they did here too.
And I can't figure out why. I mean, a camel didn't cross the street when it was raining on one side of the street and not the other. Um, a, a refinery didn't blow up. What's the excuse they're going to use this time? Switching from winter blend to summer blend? That gets kind of scary. And, what really gets scary, Mark Slavo at shtfplan.com had an article, and economist John Williams said it's the long-term insolvency of the U.S. government that markets don't like. And he was on with USA Watchdog's Greg Hunter to discuss the state of the dollar and the U.S. economy. And the monetary path that the U.S. is on is out of control, and the unwillingness of government officials to reduce the deficit and stop spending money will cause major problems in the near future, according to Williams. And they're saying years of socialist policies and reckless spending will eventually end in a complete collapse. And he says, this is Williams speaking, he says, I think you're going to see the dollar selling off very rapidly and gold rallying as a safe flight to safe haven. And that's usually what happens. When the dollar goes down, people start dumping into gold and silver. And according to Williams, the deficit is beyond control. We have $100 trillion in unfunded liabilities. That means you need $100 trillion in hand right now to cover the federal obligations going forward. And printing money to meet the obligations is what happened to the Weimar Republic in Germany. Remember when we talked a wheelbarrow full of Deutschmarks to equal one loaf of bread? Well, that happened in Zimbabwe, and this kind of thing eventually gives you a hyperinflation. The problem is people don't tell the government to spend money wisely. Instead, they spend $600 on a toilet seat going on a space shuttle or a $300 Bolt. It's kind of crazy. When I worked with the state of Ohio, we had a very strict budget that we had to follow. And our budget had to be at 0.1% spent. Now, that didn't mean that we went out and spent on just anything. We had a budget. We had to prove what we were going to do for business expansion, which is what I did with consulting and putting people into employment. And so we had to have business plans. We had to know what we were going to do the following year, and we had to purchase equipment and remodel facilities and so forth to meet that need. But we just didn't go out and spend wildly because the money wasn't there. We got federal Title II money, and we got a state match, but we still had to pay out for employees and everything else. And trust me, I've seen a lot of profit and loss statements over the years, both in private business and with the state. And you take a look at all of this, and you have all these unfunded liabilities. If the feds default and they can't pay on anything, and the Chinese come in and say, hey, we bought your treasuries, we're going to cash them in, what are you going to do? How are you going to pay for things? It's not a free ride for the politicians in Washington to just go in and spend, spend, spend. And that's what has gotten us into this problem over the last 20 years. I think they need to have somebody that oversees how the government spends and a controller that says, no, you can't spend beyond your budget. You can't go ask for extra money. And you have to have a plan to spend your money wisely. that has to benefit the public, not the government, not your pockets, but the public. You know, you take a look at things that are going on. Chris Martenson had an article from peakprosperity.com, and he said the worst threat we face right here is home, us. And you take a look at the Federal Reserve. Some people say, well, the Federal Reserve banking system shouldn't be around. It should be through the Treasury. Why would you have a private business, which essentially is what the Federal Reserve is, control the currency? And you take a look at pension plans, public and private, they've been ruined. We've talked about that in Dallas. We've talked about it out in California. We've talked about it in Chicago and in the state of Massachusetts. Pension plans are way out of whack. And eventually, nobody's going to get their money because they can't pay it. And you've got income inequality. It's the highest it's been over 100 years. Student debt is up $1.5 trillion, and it's really up $1 trillion since 2007. You've got more than $1 trillion of interest payments on savings accounts. And that's been forfeited, denying funds to the next generation for use in business creation or household formation and education. And the total debt in the U.S. is globally up massively since the 2008 Great Recession, which is called central banking incident. And it stands more than $233 trillion worldwide. Do we have that money? No. It's scary. If things start to collapse, we are in a world of hurt. And if you aren't prepared and you don't go to moneyandchange.weebly.com and check out the website, and you go back in the preparedness section, or you don't listen to our YouTube videos on the Money and Change blog, or you don't take a look at the national debt, we have that posted. We've got a lot of information at moneyandchange.weebly.com. Check out the website. It's there. It will help you prepare for anything bad that's going to happen. And you don't think, well, it's not all that bad right now. Well, there was another article. Retail apocalypse accelerates. 200 Winn-Dixie stores to close as parent goes bankrupt. Now in the South, they have a lot of Winn-Dixie stores. And every time I would go to Florida, they had Winn-Dixie, they had Albertsons, and they had Publix markets. And I want to tell you something. When Albertsons started having problems, they started selling off their groceries to Publix markets. They're privately owned. And I believe they're non-union, but they're privately owned. And they had to take those stores and clean them out and redo them and paint them back up and set up their system. And the stores, I don't know about you, but I've seen the difference between Publix markets and Kroger's. And Kroger's don't even come close to Publix. Every Publix market I've ever been in, the produce has been just beautiful. I mean, everything is there. They're very helpful. They do a lot of stuff. Great bakeries, great meat markets within the store. But here we have 200 Winn-Dixie stores are going to close. And you say, well, that was the parent that went bankrupt. But you take a look at after shutting down more than 5,000 stores in 2017, they're accelerating in 2018. That Bi-Lo LLC, the supermarket company that owns Winn-Dixie, is preparing for a potential bankruptcy filing as soon as next month, planning to shut down 200 stores. And according to that report, Winn-Dixie joins JCPenney, Bon-Ton, Toys R Us, Sam's Club, Macy's, Sears, Kmart, and others in the growing list of 2018 shutterings. JCPenney's going to shut down 8 stores. Bon-Ton, 42 stores. Toys R Us, up to 182 stores. Sam's Club, 63 stores. And that's bad news for Sam's Club members. You know, the Walmart-owned Warehouse Club, better known as Sam's, has abruptly shut down multiple locations across the country. And the retailer confirmed that 63 clubs are closing, and up to 12 of them will be converted to e-commerce fulfilling centers like Amazon stores. Walmart said the impacted clubs will close over the next few weeks, leaving 579 Sam's Club locations. Macy's is closing 11 stores. Sears and Kmart are closing 103 stores. J. Crew closing 50. And now Winn-Dixie is going to close 200 of its 500 stores. And you say, oh, we're not in a depression or a recession. We're going to be. And are you prepared? If you're not prepared, you better check in to moneyandchange.weebly.com. I'm serious. I just don't like to tell people bad news all the time, but the way that the economy is and the way things are being taken care of, it's scary. And what's really scary, there was a report that came out, the 11 cities most likely to run out of drinking water. Do you have enough drinking water in Fort Wayne?
Yeah, but we've got 3 rivers that run through our zone, so
you mean that flood through the zone?
Yeah.
I was passing through the other day and went by the Great Miami River here in Ohio, and we had a lot of rain, which you did too, probably. And it wasn't over its banks due to the levee system, but the water was up probably a good 5 feet. And we're lucky we have surface water here. But if you take a look in South Africa, Cape Town has a population of 440,000. And they ran out of water, and they have security forces to guard the water supplies. And eventually, they're going to be dry. Well, they can always desalinate water. Yeah, that's true. It's quite expensive to do that. You take a look at Sao Paulo, Brazil. One of the 10 most populated cities in the world went through something similar to Cape Town in 2015, and their main reservoir fell below 4% capacity. You had 21.7 million inhabitants had less than 20 days of water supply, and police had to escort water trucks to stop the looting. You had the same problem in Bangalore. You had the same problem in Beijing, Cairo, Jakarta, Moscow. One quarter of the world's fresh water reserves are in Russia, but the country is plagued by pollution problems caused by the industrial legacy of the old Soviet era. And it's worrying for Moscow, where the water supply is 70% dependent on surface water. And the official regulatory bodies admit that 35% to 60% of total drinking water reserves in Russia do not meet sanitary standards. Well, I had friends of mine that studied at the University of Moscow on a Fulbright scholarship. And they said, it was interesting. You turn on the tap water, and the tap water is a light brown. It wasn't rust, it was light brown. People drank bottled water, distilled water. And that was commonplace there. You didn't drink the water. You really didn't want to wash your hair in it. You really didn't even want to take a shower in it. And that was years ago. That was back in the 70s. You take a look at Mexico City. They have 21 million inhabitants, and 1 in 5 just get a few hours from their taps a week. And the other 20% have running water for just part of the day, and they import 40% of the water. It's the same thing with London and Tokyo and Miami, Florida. The U.S. state of Florida is one of the 5 states in the U.S. that have heavy rain every year. But there's a crisis in Miami, and the project to drain the swamps had an unforeseen result. The water from the Atlantic Ocean contaminated the Biscayne Aquifer and the city's main source of fresh water. So do you have enough water? Do you have enough groundwater? Do you have enough surface water? Do you have ways to purify water, to store water? That's an important thing. No water, nobody really exists. We have to really look at that. And you can take a look at things at the website at moneyandchange.weebly.com. But it's scary. And if you haven't been prepping, you've got a problem. And if you go back to the Prepping You list at moneyandchange.weebly.com, it's there. Now, a little humor before, we always do the Wrinkle City Gazette, something from the Wrinkle City. And, you ever cut your grass and found a car? Well, you can do that in Wrinkle City. You own a home that's mobile and 5 cars that aren't? Hey, you live in Wrinkle City. Chiggers are included in the list of the top 5 hygiene concerns? Yeah, you're in Wrinkle City. How about you burn your yard rather than mow it? Sometimes I wish my neighbors would. They need to mow their yards. And the bad thing is, the Salvation Army declines your mattress. And with that, that's all I've got for this week, Ira. And we urge everybody to donate to the show to keep us on the air. I donate my time and research to hopefully help people out. And, we still have to pay for the electricity, for the bandwidth, and other things that Ira needs to put the show on the air. So if you want to donate to Open Eyes Network or L&M Radio Network, please do so. And with that, Ira, that's all I've got this week, and hopefully next week we have better information.
Sounds great, Stu. Everybody out there, have a great week. Keep safe and have fun, and we'll talk to you again real soon.